Today's panel is about creativity and innovation and how the next generation of talent and the next generation of tools will converge to create something really special. So, as I say, I'm Tom Gray, CTO of Kainos. I'd just like to ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll continue.
Yeah, I'm Stuart Smith from Amazon.
I'm Luke McNeice from Kainos, and I run the research and development team at Kainos.
My name is Robert Fitzpatrick. I'm the CEO of the Odyssey Trust.
I'm PJ Holden, and I'm Creative Director of Immersive Thinking.
Okay, so Robert, you had some images you wanted to show us. So how about we start with just saying a little bit about what you do at your respective companies, and I guess what you'd like to talk about today. So, Stuart?
Sure. I just joined Amazon recently, and I'm working with Amazon Sumerian tool, which is an authoring tool and playback engine for VR, AR, and 3D scenes on the web. So as opposed to Unity or Unreal or something like that, all of this happens within your browser. So it runs on a desktop, laptop, phones, headsets, and that shareability is the thing I'm excited about and what attracted me to the project.
Thanks, Stuart. Luke?
So part of my job at Kainos is to try and find things in the future, things that aren't quite ready yet, things that are 3 to 5 years away, maybe a little bit expensive, maybe a little bit, the tooling's a little bit hard, or you need extra skills for, and bring all of that together. And one of the projects actually that I worked on recently, we're demoing a bit later, so if you haven't seen it, if you haven't got a chance to see it, please pop up upstairs after the panel, and you can see some of the work that we've done with PJ. And but it's kind of representative of one of the projects, sorry, a little bit of feedback there. One of the projects that represents us trying to work with more and more creative people, and because I found that creative people are the first people to break your tools. They're the first people to find the limits of the things that you're trying to use. And when a large part of Kainos' business is digital platforms and services, and when we kind of work with creatives and send them out to build amazing things, a lot of the time that we are able to take some of those lessons and how people kind of build those solutions and understand how people use technology, next generation tools, and bring it back to the rest of our customers, like the digital services and hospitals and banks, and be able to kind of use those same ideas.
Thanks, Luke. So, Robert, who are you and why are you here?
Well, I suppose I'm the challenge function in that I, for quite a while now, have watched this spurt of creativity and some of the sort of frustrations that have been created as a result of the innovations that have been set in play. So I wanted to, create something, create a canvas that these people could come and play in, and to not necessarily define creativity as simply being digital, but to let minds run within this space that I've created and allow them to test, allow them to explore, but most of all allow them to have a bit of fun in what we're trying to do with what I call a maze. And I'll share that with you as we go through the panel conversation.
Thanks, Robert. PJ?
So I've two distinct backgrounds. For about the past 18 years, I've been a comic book artist. I've drawn, best known for stuff in the UK, Judge Dredd, which there's been a film, some people know it. But prior to that, I was working in IT. I've done everything from tech support to programming, sales, and so on. So, but the past 10 years, I've just been a comic artist, and we're reaching a point with technology where I at the age of 14, I went to a careers advice teacher and said, look, I really love drawing, I really love computers, I love both of these things. I didn't want to pick one or the other, I love both of them. And they went, oh, you could do technical drawing. That was it, that was my option. But now we're at a point where you can look at a technology like VR stuff and AR stuff and XR and all these different things, all these two-letter acronyms, and go, oh, this is a point where the creative arts and the kind of the IT and the skills that required for programming and breaking things down. There's a kind of buzz between them. There's a moment now where you can do something interesting. And my background, as I say, is comics, and comics are narrative-driven media. They are about narrative. They're about story, and that's what really excites me and interests me, is the possibility of how do I take all these things, all these skill sets that I have already in narrative and in comic books, and how story is told, and how people understand, and how people's attention is driven by artwork, and how compositions on flat two-dimensional pieces of paper can be translated into a three-dimensional space where you can walk around and wander and look at everything. How is that all going to work? And that's what really sort of excites and interests me.
Thanks, PJ. So, Luke, you mentioned in passing the concept of digital transformation. And I guess in a nutshell, that's looking at how we use technology to transform traditional businesses, be they governments, be they banks, whatever. Just go back to PJ for a second. I mean, how has the experience you've had creating Dragon Slumber, I guess, helped you think about how you're going to transform what you normally do, i.e. comics, art, two dimensions, and actually turn into something that's much more immersive?
Well, the funny thing is, comics, and I think film and TV and so on, are so focused on the end product, so focused on what you see on screen, that you end up building this kind of long list of skills that you don't think of as skills in narrative and storytelling. And so when it comes to it, it's always about that finished thing, that finished element. You can point to it and go, there's where my skills lie on that piece of paper, or there's where my skill lie on that screen. But that's not really your skills, and that's the thing I'm discovering, is your skills are actually these kind of harder to kind of point at and say, this is a skill I have. The skills are really about, I know how to drive narrative, I know how to drive attention, and how to make you invested in a character. I know how to make you sad or make you happy, and I have all those skills already, but on flat two-dimensional pieces of paper. So it's how do I kind of take that and apply it in a three-dimensional world. And Dragon Slumber, which is upstairs, was sort of designed for 8 to 10-year-olds, and the idea is to give them a sense of awe and wonder. And we were talking to Rory about his 3 kids went through it, and they each came out super excited, having seen slightly different things, and there was a kind of real excitement about, I saw this, did you see that? And that's kind of really interesting to get a real proper emotional feedback and emotional response to these things. That's what's, I think that's what's sort of driving my interest in it, is to be able to do that. And also to be able to tell stories that, I love creating whole worlds, and sometimes in a comic, you can create a universe 1 billion light years wide, but you're still only telling this one little story. You don't get to see all of these unseen corners. Whereas in the immersive stuff you do, you can get to see all of this. I can get to paint things that are only hinted at in a comic. I can get to do those things, and if someone's attention is drawn to them, they get to experience them, and that's great. So,
super. Robert, you run an organisation that, amongst other things, has a music venue, it has a sports venue, it has an educational resource for, I guess, kids to learn about STEM. How have you been creatively innovating around that? And I guess, what's your vision for the future of the Odyssey?
God, I'm not going to do that in 10 minutes, but anyway. I suppose to narrow it down, I mean, I've always been inquisitive, and I've always sort of, I mean, I've read comics, and I've sort of immersed myself in the storylines, and I've then sort of been very sort of visionary with what I've picked up as I've gone on my journeys across my career. And when you get to my position, you then get the chance to play with all of the tools, and you also get the chance to spend the budget. And you get a chance to sort of take a lot of the maybe motivations that you've had over the years and generate it into a concept. And I've been playing about in my head. To refer back to PJ's comics, I grew up in the era of the Dandy and the Beano and stuff like that. So and there was this famous comic strip called The Numbskulls, and it was essentially this this departmental brain with all these people running about and telling stories, and it stuck with me. And then I wanted to, in the W5, it's about winning hearts and minds of children. It's about taking children in the W5 and getting them to understand that discovery should be part of their generational input, should be part of their growing up. So, and words are very important in the way that you converse in that discovery, and one of the words was amaze. So I wanted to amaze them in a maze. So a maze has been, if you like, created. And this maze that I hope will amaze people is why I'm now starting to engage at a much higher level with the digital creatives, because I think we've established something now on the ground that will open in June in Belfast and will redefine how digital creativity gets to play on its virtual blackboard in the way that we do this.
Luke, I mean, given what you've heard, I mean, how has the work that you've been doing in Kainos, and how has it enabled, folks like PJ to, turn a traditional, let's say, sort of industry or concept into something that's much more innovative, much more digital?
I like thinking about almost this problem in quite an abstract way, more about communication. I mean, a lot of the things that we do are a function of how we communicate with each other, our language, our body language, the social rules that we set up, those kinds of things. And like, if you think about all of the things that changed human history, to be super grand about it, you kind of take healthcare, take industrialization off the table. What are the things that you think about? Like, almost that it shifted society so much that it'd be difficult to explain to yourself, even if you went back in time, what it would have become. And probably everything that you think about is probably a communication tool. You're talking about language, writing, TV, radio, internet, phones. And I believe that the next thing, we won't stop at phones, we won't stop at internet. The next thing is something that has to engage our senses in a way that lets us communicate better. And I think the edge of that, the people who always push the edge of what that means, are always creatives. Because they're always the ones that are trying to find continually new ways of expressing themselves and communicate their ideas. And the work that we had done with PJ, and we hosted it in W5 at the Odyssey, was a way to kind of bring all of that together and to try and test what that might look like. So could we bring PJ in and express the vision, this fantasy world, and enable that through just really good engineering that just worked and enabled, as little limitation on the ability for you to express yourself as possible. I mean, I guess it's a good thing to chat about, like, what limitations did you
tools,
find?
I think I'll bring you in and talk about the tools that are there, because I think one of the things we found was sort of building in a massive VR immersive experience. You find yourself going, well, what are the tools that I've got now to do this? And right now the set's fairly limited. They are, there's a tilt brush, which is great for painting, but only to a certain scale. There are Surface is another program, but only to a certain size. And when you're trying to do something bigger, it's harder. So,
what are Amazon? What's next?
What's Amazon got? There you go. It's all on you now.
Well, as long as we just keep it in this room. Yeah. No, I wish I had some amazing announcements to make, but I could certainly.
No one will know.
I was going to say that creativity can be enormously inefficient. When I think about the fact, we were talking earlier, and PJ was, you were showing me the amazing experience that you made upstairs, where you had drawn the whole thing in tilt brush, and I think you had said you started out fighting tilt brush a bit, and then trying to make it. But how many visual artists do we have here? Any visual artists? Yes, and it feels like. Yeah? You're good. Okay. Yeah, it's got a little bit of a buzz. But it feels like the tools that you'll use to create your visual art necessarily influence. Sorry, I'm an American. Just get on stage. So yeah, now that I've dragged on this sentence for 10 minutes, your tools are going to influence what the thing is that you make, of course. And the ability to find what the tool is good for, it feels like it takes so long to get there. You have to spend an enormous amount of energy playing with it to discover this.
Generally, often the medium will dictate what you can do with it. Even if you talk about watercolors, it's a completely different medium than oil painting. And so what you're capable of doing with that produces different kind of work. And so when you go into VR and AR stuff and immersive stuff, then the experiences you're going to be able to build are going to be very kind of fixed on what those tools can do. So for example, with Tilt Brush, I was trying to build a sort of realistic experience by painting kind of lines and I couldn't get it to work. So then I tried, well, let's see if I could kind of more abstract paint, and that didn't quite work either. And so ultimately what I ended up doing was rolling with one of the tools it has, which allows you to draw kind of 3D shapes in space. So you can very simply draw out the bounds of a square, and you've got something that looks vaguely square-like, but because you're building this in 3D, it's very hard to keep your arm steady. It's very hard, you're almost limited by the reach of your own body. And so you're never going to get a perfect square. But if you accept that and realize, well, that's okay. I don't need a perfect looking thing. I just need everything to be of a piece. I need all of this to feel like it belongs together. Once you accept that and learn that, then you can get something really nice out of it, I think, really beautiful out of it.
I almost wanted to turn the question that you were saying about limitations back to you, Stuart, because like you did an amazing piece of work that some people might not have know about here, the LCD sound system track. Tell people about that. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you. That's very kind. And then I also have to give a shout out to Jonathan Puckey and his crew over in the Netherlands. Always. I worked with really amazing people to make this web VR music video for LCD sound system. And officially it came out of Google's data arts team, which I was excited to be a part of for a little bit. And long story short, music video that runs in your browser, but it's VR. So how can we make this VR experience play back at a decent frame rate, even on lesser hardware? And that dictated a lot of the visuals. Simple polygon shapes, simple interactions, so that it never felt like it was laggy or that you were fighting it. It just needed to feel like you were dancing. And ultimately, that's what the video was, is you recorded yourself dancing along to the music. And because it was recording your movements, those movements became part of the music video for the next people who are watching it. So the whole video is just people dancing, and it's a lot of fun.
Brilliant. Luke, I probably skipped over a lot of the Kainos background. So enterprise solutions company, we typically do back-end integration projects for banks and governments. So why is a company like Kainos getting involved in dragons and things like that? What do we get out of it? And I guess what types of skills do we need that we don't have within the organization?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest key. I think skill. You mentioned skills. I mean, I get the question a lot, and you can imagine, a bank or any business that would build software or build a product. Why are anyone doing things like that? Why are we at South by? I think it boils down to that versatility and creativity and diversity of ideas is really important, and I believe becoming more important. And by working across different teams and trying to inspire people to problem solve in general, that skill, those things that they learn, almost irrelevant to the domain, can be used to build super talented, autonomous, thoughtful, empathetic staff that are able to basically solve world-class problems. I mean, some of the work that we've done with some of our government customers, things like the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency in the UK is responsible for driving licenses, being able to tax your car, making safer roads, safer cars. So they're responsible for all of that. And one of the pieces of work that we had done was around kind of the quality of car inspections. So in the UK, the way it works is you can kind of book your car into any garage and they assess it for you and they kind of tick it, and then you're allowed to drive your car for another year. And the challenge is, of course, I mean, if you have 65,000 garages, how do you police the quality of that at that scale? It's a really difficult problem. And I mean, think about even 1% of that is human life. It's a risk to human life. And it's a big challenge. And we work with DVSA on a machine learning tool, as an example, to be able to help prioritize looking for the garages to assess using a lot of data, sometimes even just metadata. And in our pilot that we ran in the first 6 weeks, we were able to find a number of quality issues that led to a prosecution, and that was within 6 weeks. In the first trial, and that kind of the teams that are on the ground. When we are able to train them in these kind of very versatile, very diverse problem-solving environments, it lends itself to be able to to kind of put teams on the ground and have them do really great work like that.
Okay, so to keep on the skills theme, I know skills is a subject dear to your heart, Robert. I mean, how can you see, the digital landscape affecting how you interact with, the kids that come in to learn about STEM, to learn about, I guess, how to interact better with the world?
Yeah, we got to find a way to break the institutional notion that universities have all the answers. They don't, and we got to find a way to start talking to people directly about optioning their 3 years of their life, not for a piece of paper that says it's the degree, but they actually say, hang on, if we're working with you and you want to come and work for us and we can give you an opportunity to work for us for 3 years and here's a bit of accreditation that means you're going to get 25,000 instead of 10,000, come and play. So the notion that we have to be traditional, I think, is now gone. I think it's past. I think that it's time for that level of, and I don't actually call it creativity, I call it questioning. Can we actually challenge a set of questions that need to be answered, not societally, but actually by individuals? Can we actually embrace an opportunity where kids are going to come along and say, I don't really want to burn 30 grand of a parent's money doing a degree in social services when I like to draw or I like to work in IT. I want to go and do something with somebody like Luke who's going to come and say to me, you think this is easy? Here are the boundaries of your compression. Now go and break those bounds. So the notion of telling kids that when they get to A-level, they don't have to go down a track where they're doing law or medicine to be successful is my start point. And then from there, giving them the opportunity, not so much to learn through academia, but to actually learn through discovery. And for me, the big motivation that I have at the minute is to try and twin track those two ideals into an actual applied route where we can create the opportunity for people to come and discover and then to learn in maybe a more unconventional way.
Okay, I think we've always heard that there's tech people and there's creative people as if they were mutually exclusive. I don't know if that was ever true, but it kind of feels like it's certainly not true now. I mean, what's your perspective on this, Stuart, from an Amazon and your background?
Well, I remember university, I ended up joining the fine arts program. I learned to program as a kid, but graphic design is where I ultimately ended up for education. And it was kind of in the back of my head that I wanted to do something with both. I was already doing that on my own. And I remember sitting in the dean's office, waiting to get some paper signed or something, and this other student came in, and he was majoring in painting or something of that nature, and he wanted to get something signed so that he could also take the upper-level computer science courses. And the dean of the School of Arts, as soon as she reluctantly signed it for this student, but as soon as he left, he was out of earshot, started berating the idea that any idiot would want to do something like that. And I remember looking at her and just thinking, wow, this is And of course now it's cool. Now you get paid money for for doing that. But yeah, I think maybe I went through the system a little too early.
And
Bit of a resistance.
I mean, are you, I guess, have you any views on what Amazon as an organization thinks about that sort of tech creative skills challenge? I asked that question because Amazon is being, I guess, quite a useful provocateur in Northern Ireland around trying to drive real initiative and real innovation around skills.
Well, I think I can only speak to it in a really limited way since I've joined so recently. But the fact that they would select me for the position that I'm in kind of speaks to that, where being a hybrid with a technical background and a creative background, that seems to be what they're on the lookout for. So I'm thankful.
Excellent. And PJ, you kind of sound like the archetypal hybrid with both the tech background and a creative background.
I mean, I wish I could have joined the things up much sooner instead of running essentially two long-term careers, one in computers and then one in comics. It would have been nice to be able to kind of go, oh no, I can do both of these now. That would be great. I just want to pick up on something that you'd asked about what working with a creative helps with Kainos, and how I think one of the things that maybe, I don't know, I maybe Luke can verify this, but I think the communication, I think when Luke and I sat down in a room to talk about things, it was very clear to me that you guys coming from a corporate background knew how to speak to your corporate customers, and me coming from a creative background knew how to kind of, elicit kind of emotional responses that excite and we talked about some of the names of the things that we were coming up with, and it felt like we were at like two opposite polar ends, and we had to sort of join in the middle. And I've been dragged towards you guys. I think I've dragged you guys towards me as well. And some of the stuff that we've even just some of the text pieces that we've written around doing this has been me sort of sitting down and going, oh no, I think you could write this in a slightly more exciting way that would stimulate sort of a thought better than this. And I think that's a thing that corporates don't necessarily need to worry about how excited somebody gets about what they're saying, because a company will go, I need this for my bank. I don't need to get excited about it. I need this. So I'm kind of wondering if that's just an interesting experience we've had, or whether you think there's any wider use to that.
Yeah, something cheesy. I totally agree with that. Something cheesy I would often say is great stories happen to people that can tell them, and it's the good storytelling, and definitely the experience that we had working together was that. Engineers, my background, we're just not taught to be good storytellers. We're never taught to be good storytellers. So it's not until later on that we realize that, and especially because we often live in little bubbles, in engineering bubbles, that we speak, very engineering language to each other, and it's not until we have to kind of start interacting with customers. And I've certainly really enjoyed working with really creative teams. It's certainly pushed my communication limits.
Luke, so I've probably taken this panel way off the original topic, but I think now after a nervous starting some fun. One of the premises that you wanted to explore was with new tools, it's kind of the next generation that can really take full advantage of the creativity and innovation of the tools. What did you mean by that?
I used Snapchat as the kind of example.
Because I don't get Snapchat at all.
So it's like if a technology is new to you. Here's a better example. Does anybody in the room have anyone over the age of 84 as a relative? Okay, great. Ask them about elevators, and what they will tell you is it scared the life out of them. And that they were, how could a robot move an elevator up and down? How would it know how to stop? How could you trust it? And I thought that was really interesting. And I was doing a research for a talk before, and I was using one of these examples of how people kind of emotionally respond to new things. And but now we don't even think about it. Technologies, we don't even think that it's about a technology. We get in the lift, we get in the elevator, press the button, and it takes us from A to B. And I think what ends up happening, a bit like Snapchat, it's like, what is that? Why are all these young people painting their faces? And
you're not 84, Tom, just to confirm that. No.
But to kind of to use those little symptoms as the point, I think that when a new technology comes along, nobody knows what to do with it yet, and the kind of the generation that it kind of is born into, or it just appears in, it kind of just scrap around, and people like Stuart, trying to build tools for that next generation.
I think what tends to happen is when technology comes out, people are told, here are the bounds of how this should be used, and the generation that receive that go, oh, we will use it to these bounds, and then a younger generation comes along and goes, why are we doing it in this, why am I not pulling it over this direction, way over here, that no one has ever thought of doing? And so that next generation does that and yanks these things away from you, and so before you know it, they're doing stuff you weren't expecting, and you're kind of going, oh wow, oh I didn't know we could do that.
Yeah, we were chatting earlier. So I have a little boy, and he's 8 years old, and he has limited VR experience, and I have some good VR headsets at home. But the language that he uses when he wants to do something in there is really interesting. It's kind of like a means to an end for him. So instead of him asking me, Daddy, can I have some VR now? He said, Daddy, can I go to Russia today? And what that really means is, in my language, is put a headset on, run Google VR, search for, it's a means to an end for him. I was telling you about the other experience, the Minecraft one.
The analogy I suggested was a bit like cars. It's like a generation who would have gone, shall we go out in the car today? And we don't do that. We go, shall we go to the shop? Shall we go to the park? We don't think about the technology anymore. It's gone. It's just gone.
Yeah, and one question I think about a lot, I'd love to ask everyone here is, how do we do that faster? How do we take that next generation?
Slow it down. It's too fast already.
Help them to understand that here's a safe place to start breaking rules. It's
Unstructured time.
like we need more play.
Yeah, I mean, I also have children, and everything is scheduled and processed and made safe. And geez, when I think about the fact that I still have all my 10 fingers and what I used to do as a child, but it also taught me so much. It taught me to question the difference between what you're told a tool is used for versus what is a tool actually good at, because you find that through discovery.
Getting it wrong, using it wrong.
Yeah.
But I think also that increasingly, as we move forward in this space of technology, the new currency for families and 8-year-olds and cool dads and stuff like that is going to be time. And I think what's actually going to happen is that competition is going to be driven by the best use of time. And you're going to have these buildings, you're going to have these fixtures that offer the best experience of the time with the budget that you're prepared to commit to get that. And I think that learning experience within this spending of time, it's not spending of money, it's spending of time. And the spending of time experience is going to be the motivator for a lot of the stuff that the guys are talking about to start to happen quicker, because there's going to be a demand. And when there is a demand, the market moves quicker. And if the market starts to understand that they're actually trying to create a circumstance where they own people's time, then for my mind, you're well on your way.
But I do have some concerns about that, because I feel like the airline industry has already figured out they own your time, and you do have to pay more for a better experience of that.
Yeah, well, trust me, the arena business is no different, because once you go in, you can't get out. But no, I think it's the subtle difference between airlines and arenas and stuff like that is around the choice you have to make to get from A to B. The time that I'm talking about is the allocation of quality time that you want to spend with your family and the affordability that you can create to make that time happen. And whether there's an orientation of having to put in the time to get there, or the time to come back, or the time to buy the secondary spend, you see the primary thing is just something simple that's never going to change. But I think more and more and more about the pressures of family life and them saying, okay, we are going to spend 2 weeks in July, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what we've got to spend to buy the best time experience that we can buy. And that's where I think the creativity is going to drive this desire to own people's time.
Okay, so this is totally irrelevant, but I've got the mic, so I kind of don't care. PJ, Your past experience with comics has kind of been something that is consumed by an individual at a time,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
Dragon Slumber, virtual reality, again, is consumed by an individual at a time. You know, that does not work in Robert's Arena world.
Well,
I mean, how do you scale those types of
Well,
experiences?
first of all, I'd point out there's a distinct difference between comic time and an experience like Dragon Slumber. The experience of Dragon Slumber is sort of time limited by the size of the venue, by the people taking you around. There's a set amount of time that you go through. A comic reader will often go back and revisit. They might spend hours over it. They might spend 10 minutes over it. They will enjoy every moment of time. For every kind of, the first time you might read a comic might take you 2 minutes. The second time you read a comic might take you 3 or 4 hours. I have very little control over the amount of time, is what I'm saying. I can slow someone down by adding more detail into the artwork, but that slows the reading experience, and it controls the passage of time in the comic, but not the passage of time it takes someone to read it. In an experience like Dragon Slumber, where it's an immersive experience, a lot of it was about, well, I did have to think about time. That became a bigger focus for me, how do we slow someone down to make sure they see everything? How much stuff can I put in this to fill? If we're going to give them 5 minutes in it, we need more things. If we're going to give them 2 minutes in it, we need to be able to push them through faster. So the experience that was built around how much time we had to put someone through that. So there's similarities, but there's also really have massive differences between them.
That's what I think, and I think that's very well said. But that's a contribution to the timepiece. Yeah. You have to have the place. You have to have this defined space where all of the parental things have to be ticked off. So they have to be safe. They have to be dry. They have to be warm. They have to be all of these things.
They have to have all their fingers.
They have to have all their fingers. They're not going to run the risk of getting crashed in the car, falling off a rope sling, or whatever the case may be. So you've got to try and make a space. And the digital interaction of something like Dragon Slumber, for example, starts to create that space for them where they are safe and they walk out. And I mean, for someone that's not imbued with, and I suppose I'm the oldest one on the panel, but it's slightly bizarre when your daughter's taking a photograph of you walking around your building with a mask on, and you see a pole in front of you with the mask on, and you reach out to hold the pole, and you know you're walking on your building floor, and you want to hold the pole, and you just go, that's an experience. That's a motivation. And the communication of that, for me, is the ultimate compliment that you can pay if you've delivered on your expectation, let's say.
Thanks, Robert. So, a different question. Stuart, why is Amazon investing in VR, AR? Yep. What's in it for them?
Well, I think that is a much...
Can they sell me?
Yeah, exactly.
VR?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of tantalizing speculation there, but the ultimate answer is a bit over my pay grade, unfortunately. But I can tell you why I'm excited about it and why some other folks working on Sumerian are excited about it. The ability to reach someone physically and emotionally is quite exciting. And with Sumerian or any web-based VR tool, which is the kind of thing that I'm excited about, the ability to share that is so easy. Like the Spider-Man thing that I was showing you earlier. We just pulled up a URL on the phone and we're in the experience. So there's no app to download or anything to sign up for or configure. It's just a low barrier of entry. And I think when you can take creative tools and lower that barrier to entry and hand it out to everyone, you start to see some amazing things pop up.
Luke, what has, I guess, inspired you most over the past few months with the work that you've done with these various gentlemen and companies? What's been the thing that you've said, yeah, I'm really glad I did that?
Good lunch.
Yeah, right. I am personally motivated by things that are really weird, things that I don't understand, and it's why I love South by, to be honest, it's probably. And I think certainly with immersive in particular, with the recent work, but also with a lot of the other new technologies that are coming along, they're very, very difficult to predict. It's almost like the pace of change is speeding up so much that it's I think we're just all terrible generally at predicting the future. I think it's getting really, really even harder. We've got all these things that are coming along and are building on themselves, exponentially. But then when two of these exponential things come together and can affect each other, that's Rain Man level prediction, and I think that's super interesting, and that's certainly the thing that's driven a lot of the work that I do at Kainos, a lot of the relationships that I've been building, trying to do increasingly weird things to try and push those boundaries and try and figure out, almost get ahead of this little exponential curve to see, right, okay, can't do that, but I think it might be able to do this, or here's a workaround for that limitation. That's probably what I'm most inspired by.
Robert, same question. Most inspirational thing working with this group of individuals and people?
Well, it's just awe-inspiring. I mean, I love the can-do. I sort of didn't, when the day they taught no at school, I wasn't there, so no doesn't really mean a lot to me. And when I started to talk to the guys and listen to the guys and realized that this thing that they created was done in 2 months, and I sort of went, wow, okay, you can come and play. And I've been excited now because, for me, I can only work with the tools that I understand at the moment. So I'm creating this space with immersive sound, and I'm creating this space with digital technology that allows Bono and The Edge and those guys to do what they do in shows, and we're going to create that and put that into a footprint. And the idea that we can now parachute this wonderful technology and this creativity and essentially start to mess with people and start to get them to sort of reinterpret. And I mean, I have these crazy ideas about having these. I mean, the one big one that I want to do is I want to do a virtual gallery where you hear the painting. I mean, I've got so many different sort of options of stuff that we can do now. And it's because I'm now starting to understand that there really aren't that many boundaries to your imagination. And there aren't that many boundaries to the application of your imagination, and they're quicking up and coming together very, very quickly.
PJ?
Well, for me, so one of the things I like about any kind of medium is the emotional experience. And I mean, I love drawing comics, but I always wanted to, when I drew comics, even as a child, the first thing I did was shared them with other people. I enjoyed the experience of making them, but I wanted to see other people's reactions. That's what really made me excited about making the work. That's what made me sit in a room on my own for hours and hours on end, so I could give it to someone else and they go, oh, that's all right. The thing that I find really interesting about the immersive stuff is that I could spend 2 or 3 months writing and drawing a comic book. I could get it printed up. It would be a thing I could hand to someone. And the amount of time it would take them to read it and respond to it would be 3 months later, 2 months later, 8 weeks later, whatever. Whereas with Dragon Slumber, as soon as someone's put that helmet on, you can see the reaction straight away. There's an emotional response almost immediately, and that's really... I don't think I was expecting it to be just as rapid. I knew we'd get some kind of strong emotional responses from kids, and I was pretty sure some of the adults might be underwhelmed, or they might go, well, I've seen stuff like this or whatever. But everyone has had... adults do react differently. They tentatively walk through the experience hoping they're not going to fall. Children run straight towards whatever wall is there, so they just woof, like that. But they all come out of it with a strong emotional reaction, and I think even comic readers don't always have a strong emotional reaction to a comic, and so that's been the thing that's been very rewarding, is seeing that and knowing that is a thing that you can play with.
Super. So if anybody hasn't seen Dragon Slumber, please go upstairs after the talk. Be very welcome to take you through it. I've no idea what we've talked about, but I've kind of enjoyed the conversation. Has anybody got any questions for the panel before we close?
Hi. A lot of you talked about immersive being really very strong emotions, but do you think we're going to get a lot of fatigue? I mean, it's very new, especially AR, and you can even see AR 2 years ago, there was people doing stuff and people were like, wow, and now everyone's like, yeah, whatever. So, yeah, where do you think that's going to go? I mean, obviously story is really important there, but it is wild. A lot of people are saying Wild West, aren't they? They're like, I don't know. But what do you think is going to happen? I mean, a couple of you talked about generations, and things like that?
I think we're going to see an evolution of things. So right now, Dragon Slumber is a great fun experience. 3 hours in Dragon Slumber, would you still be as excited? I doubt it very much, but it's a short experience. So you go in, you come out and go, that was great. If you go to it week after week after week after week for that, you'll not have that. I mean, there's I remember seeing a great documentary about a bit with a sea cucumber, and they showed you this thing being poked. And the sea cucumber, the most basic nervous system, and it was being poked very consistently every 30 seconds like that, and it would react instantly. And then after a couple of minutes, it stopped reacting. It got bored of being poked. And we have that built into us. It's like a really fundamental low level. We get bored of things, and so we have to constantly search for new things. So for me, Dragon Slumber is very much a first step towards what we can do. I think right now, anyone who sees it the first time will be very excited about it. The second time, they might see different things. There's a lot of little Easter eggs and so on in there, in that experience. But I do think the focus right now is, because we're at this sort of ground level with all of the immersive stuff, it's about instant emotional reactions. But at some point, we're going to want to start seeing narrative. At some point, when the hardware isn't so physically onerous to wear, we'll put on a pair of shades or something that's very much lighter, and then you'll be able to sit in it for 2 hours, and you'll be able to watch or take part of something, or feel much more compelled to see a whole narrative. But a narrative is what keeps your interest for the 2 hours. You cannot be put through an emotional experience for 2 or 3 hours and come out of it feeling like, whoa, I could do that again. So I do think there will be an evolution towards kind of long form narrative.
It has to be a prompt for learning. It has to be a prompt. For someone to come out of the experience and go, whether it's back to the traditional route, how did they do that? It has to leave the question of sort of an interested mind. So if they go in and they immerse themselves in whether it's experiential or whether it's something that you're wanting to teach them, they've got to learn something from it. And I mean, I think increasingly, that type of technology, that type of immersive technology in virtual schoolroom and virtual classroom and all that sort of stuff will become de rigueur. I don't see it changing any other way.
For me, hardware definitely is causing some limitations, or causing physical and mental fatigue for sure. I think most of the fatigue is probably coming from the way in which we're doing things, so like the user experience. But at the same time, I think there's also there's a cost-value trade-off that we will use these set of tools for. For example, I do a lot of CAD drawings. CAD drawings, three-dimensional drawings. Recently, I've just been getting into 3D printing, and one of the things that I'm finding is that I am using my desktop to design certain things in certain ways, and I'm jumping in to use VR to do certain things in certain ways. And I'm doing it that way, even though that's doing it immersively is really physically fatiguing, that I can run so much faster using those sets of tools. So it's kind of like a value cost trade-off for me, but it's probably going to get better as well.
I think I interpreted your question a little differently. It seemed, were you talking about like the VR hype cycle? And
that things that are really delightful and amazing now may get tired quickly, and then the things you were talking about, this wonder. I mean, give it a few years, will it be that amazing? And how do you plan for that sort of thing?
And I'm not too worried about it, because I really do see it as well, let me put it this way. I think Bruce Sterling would say, like, the victory condition for any technology is it's just boring and banal and everyday.
Yeah, no
like
one
this
gets
magic
that excited
wireless
about TVs.
Microphone, no one cares, right? But this is actually a very useful, amazing piece of technology. And the fact that none of us cares means it's done very well.
You're just elevating the emotion.
Yeah,
That's what you're doing. That's where Maze works. You just elevate the emotion. You can tell any story you want in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dimensions, whatever way you want to do it. And it's really only how much of that you wish to own, and how much of the emotion that you have within yourself you want to share. Now, and it's beyond emotional intelligence now. It's actually emotional agility. It's actually being agile within the context of the next pair of glasses or the next microphone or the next roll-up TV. That's what it's about. And that's why the Amaze concept is to my mind, it's just a place. What goes into that place is what you decide. And that for me is the game changer.
Just to finish the thought that began with the microphones. No, it's fine. What I was going to say is I see it as very similar to television or movies in the sense that do any of you care that TVs, are any of you amazed that TVs exist? No. I mean, you've got a TV in your pocket, whatever. No one cares. Does that stop us from, laughing or crying at a narrative that we see on the TV that's well crafted, or movies? And repeatedly, you're no longer a 5-year-old, and this magic 2D box still will make you laugh and cry and feel things. So will the VR hype cycle mean anything ultimately? I don't think so. I think good content will continue to be created, and we'll be fatigued, and then the next day we'll be like, well, let's do that again.
Yeah, I think we're really at the point where a film of a train driving towards you is super exciting. That's where we are, and granted, we're building very nice trains that look really cool coming towards you, but in 3 or 4 years we will want to see something more. But it won't be about the hardware, it won't be about the technology so much, it'll just be about the story and the narrative and the experience and so on, and how you experience that, whether you experience it at home or in a building like a maze or in another venue.
Super, thank you. Great question. Any other questions before we close?
Give us a hard one.
Oh, one hard question coming up. Oh, no.
So,
no maths.
No maths. Yeah. What's 1 + 6? My question is, I guess at the minute the technology is usually focused on individuals in experiences. Where do you see things going where you can kind of have more of a collective experience, and what might that look like, or what might you think about that?
Well, I think a lot of the stuff that's getting hyped is individual, but the music video that I worked on with LCD Sound System, the whole point was that you were in there with other people, and that you could leave a trace of yourself for someone else to find. And right now, it's not true co-presence. You're not seeing someone else in real time, but I don't think this is giving away secrets. That my early sketches for this stuff did actually have co-presence. It was just a URL that you visit, and suddenly you're both in the same world. And you can run around. It was like a flashlight tag demo where you would blaze these little light trails behind you. It's cute. So I think a lot of that already exists, where it's for multiple people at the same time. But this stuff is still like 1%er stuff, right? This is still expensive. But that will change. All of us have these incredible smartphones that legally, literally would have been illegal 20 years ago because of export restrictions on cryptography. And now we all have supercomputers in our pockets. So just give it time. Be democratized.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that the answer is probably just a function of cost. And right now, to be able to deliver an experience like co-presence, it just isn't accessible to much above the 1%. But we've seen miracles. Our smartphones in our pockets. Before that. The first iPhone, to be cliche about it, was a bunch of boxes all connected to each other on a table that was $500,000 parts cost, and within 2-3 years that went all the way down to a couple $100. That unlocked obviously huge things that we couldn't even see coming. A lot of connection.
I think it's going to be the market. I think again, there's going to be a rush to market. I think with, nobody owns a Nokia now. Yet Nokia were, what they were before Apple came along and new technology levels started to kick in again. I think the market's going to play a huge part because I think demand will drive innovation, and I think that, and I particularly like something Luke was saying to me yesterday about, don't give me something that I've got to work out differently. That pushes beyond that boundary. And if I can do that, then I've set the bar a little bit higher. And it's just really like a high jump. It's like, it's like sort of, you've just got over 6'1". Well, can we do 6'3"? Well, let's go away and practice, and maybe you'll invent a new way of getting over it, but you'll get over it. And that's driven by what I suspect will be a huge market demand for this stuff.
Just not even taking the long view, just taking the sort of shorter view. Dragon Slumber I'll just say it a million times so everyone hears it, is a one-to-one experience, right? You're right about that. But also it's asymmetric in the sense that if we had a venue that was more appropriate than this, we could have other kids joining in and doing things while someone was going through that experience. You could have people watching them. You could have people guiding them, for example. You could have, so you're sort of walking through a gantry that's got a very fixed path, but that gantry could have multiple paths with choices, and you could have people kind of shouting directions, turn left, there's a thing coming. So you can have that kind of experience in the shorter term before the technology even evolves to the point where everyone can be wearing the headsets, or the headsets are so small and light and invisible that it doesn't matter. We all wear them anyway because we're all wearing glasses, and all glasses have it by default. That's so. In the shorter term, there's definitely things that you can do. I think it's one of the things that the creatives are good at is. We were talking earlier about how the next generation is always kind of breaking the boundaries. It's also that's the thing that created, comic artists and visual artists and sound artists and all these people do is they go, oh well, why can't I make it do this instead? And that. So those artists are going to push what that technology can do and kind of play with what we've got. But we can only play with what we've got. We can't play with what's coming next. So and then you do that, and then that sort of informs the shape of what's coming next, maybe.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're out of time. Ferris and Sylvester will be joining us in a second, so please feel free to stay for them. Likewise, panellists will be around probably for the next hour or so. And if you haven't seen Dragon Slumber or Berlin Blitz or Impossible Hotel or Infinite Hotel, please go upstairs and try it out. So can I just ask you to thank the panel?
Thank you.
And thank you for coming.